On this Wednesday, January the 24th, we are celebrating the 116th anniversary since the creation of the Boy Scouts. Born in England from a British Army officer and still alive to this day with over 50 million members. 50 million, which might also have been the amount of keys that in this season have been depleted in Muruzond's Rise. What we are talking about today is a sneaky round of unexpected changes, namely nerfs, to this dungeon. If you have been watching my videos now and then, we have mentioned multiple times throughout our Mythic Plus recaps, whenever we took a quick look, a quick peek at the state of the dungeons, the fact that Muruzond's Rise has been the overall hardest dungeon this season. Even though we were still praising the season for being significantly easier in terms of difficulty of dungeons compared to previous seasons, if we had to single out the two harder dungeons overall, we had Throne of the Tides and Muruzond's Rise at the bottom. Many complaints still remained about this dungeon, even when we go and look at the best possible weeks of each dungeon and the best possible results. You would find Everbloom from the first week of the season improving over 2 months by barely a percentage, even as you go scrolling down to not nearly as easy dungeon. Galakrond's Fall over 2 months would only have improved by about 13% in success rate. You keep scrolling down to Dark Ticket, it's about a 9% increase, and then you go down to Muruzond's Rise and it goes from 51 to 78. So it's a whooping 28% increase, and even then it still remains the harder of the dungeons. It took Blizzard only a couple of months to figure out exactly in which ways to deal with this dungeon, and here are the nerfs for today for this key. Nerf number 1 is the Triangle of Love that gets nerfed all throughout. It's a Valo, Lerai and Spurlock, more quickly shown in here. So the 3 mini-bosses before spawning tier are all getting their health reduced by 16%. On top of that, you have Lerai, the Maiden, which gets its Ancient Radiance to be recast less often, twice as rare to cast this ability, which of course becomes quite the danger in high fortified keys because of the sheer amount of damage he keeps doing. And then you have Spurlock, which gets Shrouding Sandstorm's recast time also increased. This one wasn't nearly as dangerous or nearly as deadly. It didn't even feel unfair, to be honest. The only annoyance was just how much slower it would make the dungeon. Just having to lose time because of this fucking snake getting untargetable and undamageable for a bit every now and then. Now it's gonna happen less often. Talking about the boss himself, the first boss of the dungeon, Tyr, gets the Radiant Barrier damage absorb reduced by 15%. This is also on an attempt to sort of slow down the mega scaling in very high keys of these type of absorb shields or intermission phases, which usually tend to become super long in very high keys. This is the attempt for this first boss. Talking about annoying casts which get slowed down, which get delayed in the amount of time they get cast, you have the Infinite Riftmage. So in the circular plaza you have to clear out to get to the 3 different portals you will have to enter. The Infinite Riftmage is getting its health reduced by 10%, but more importantly, Infinite Burn is getting its recast time increased. This was particularly painful, just as we ended our afflicted week. Particularly painful when, as a healer, you were dispelling an afflicted mob, and then this mob would get its infinite burn cast off, and now you have no dispel to get rid of this dot, and you would notice how much it would hurt. And that was in Tyrannical. So this week is gonna hurt even harder, except it won't get cast nearly as often. This will make it also more manageable to pull this mob together with the big dog that casts the bloom dot, one on the tank, one on your other players, which you also want to dispel, and pulling both of these mobs together was quite dangerous as a healer because you could only dispel one of these 2 very heavy hitting dots. Now it is more manageable. One of the more unsuspecting nerfs, I bet, is the one to the time-lost battlefield, because I'm sure that as you read this, you're kind of confused. It says that Battle Senses, the Alliance version, or Thirst for Battle, the Horde version, gets its damage reduced by 20%, as well as being slightly slower when the boss is going to do Bladestorm. However, you are kind of confused, because if you were to describe this boss fight, you would be saying, well, the boss is going to do some shockwaves you have to dodge, it's going to spawn some adds you have to take down, it's going to do a Bladestorm to chase players, it's also going to occasionally do some party-wide AoE damage and then put a dangerous Mortal Strike heal reduction on the tank. Well, there is a reason why the entire battlefield is covered by NPCs, by Horde and Alliance mobs fighting each other, which up to this point you only know about because you get triggered whenever you try to tab target or just move around your mouse and you discover you have been targeting one of those things all this time instead of the boss. That is usually what players find annoying about all of these NPCs scattered throughout the arena. Well, this actual ability is the thing that makes you take even more AoE damage the more of those NPCs die. That is the reason why, for example, if you watch high level keys, if you watch streams or videos where keys are being done at a decent level, most of the times the shockwave has to be baited, since it is going to be aimed at one of the players. It has to be aimed towards the outside of the room, because you don't want the shockwave to just casually murder dozens of these little guys, because if it does, you are going to take even more damage as soon as he starts auto-attacking and unloading all of the charges that he gained from defeating these small guys. Same goes for the Bladestorm. You want to at least try to run away, not in the same path of the NPCs that would end up getting killed by the Bladestorm. This damage, the AoE damage you take if the NPCs die, is what is being nerfed in this boss fight. Then you have another bit of a nerf which will likely go under the radar for everyone who isn't a tank, most likely, which is the Chronolore Deus, the last boss's Temporal Breath. Both the initial damage and the damage over time done by the breath are nerfed, 16 and 14%. I'm saying noticed by the tanks because this was one of the hardest hitting mechanics in Tyrannical Keys when it came to just trying to survive as a tank, when it came to having to rotate defensive cooldowns to survive this hit. It was very, very dangerous. It still uses to farm tanks for fun, especially Prot Paladin tanks, having more problems dealing with this mechanic. Now it is getting nerfed by just a little bit. Talking about the last boss, it continues to be nerfed because also the adds, the trash spawning in the encounter gets nerfed. Number one, the health is reduced by 10%. The burn, the dot damage that they cast on players is reduced by 15%, and then also infinite blast damage is reduced by 10%. This is less relevant. It's more important to have them die faster because they have less health, and also to have the dot do less damage, because sometimes you might mess up your stuns, your interrupts, your CCs, and they might end up casting multiple of these dots out on multiple players, and as a healer you cannot dispel them all. These are all of the nerfs that are happening to Muruzond's Rise. Very likely, of course, this will make the dungeon faster and easier on certain more tedious pulls, especially the first mini bosses before you get to Tyr, and then Tyr himself are quite the time sink of the dungeon. However, it is still worth reminding about the large amount of annoyance around this dungeon when it comes to unskippable, long backtracking, running, RPing that goes on through the dungeon. And this has been significantly reduced from the original version in the Mega Dungeon before it was turned into a Mythic Plus key. If you take into account the 30 seconds it takes to spawn Tyr, the roleplay, to spawn Tyr, which can be skipped, of course. You can defeat the mini-boss to trigger this 30-second roleplay, but you won't have a group to always do it. You then have to spend about 80 or so seconds to go through the gauntlet You might be saying, well, just get good. Just do it in one go. Never fail and take 10 seconds. Well, number one, you know that's never gonna happen. There is always going to be 1 or 2 players stuck behind, so you have to power up the orb to allow the skip. But more importantly, this doesn't even matter because the orb needs to be filled to unlock the spawn point when you die. So obviously you would still have to spend some time channeling the power-up for this orb anyways, even if you were acing the gauntlet. You then have to spend 60 or so seconds, about a minute, to be able to travel to Morchi, which also includes the roleplay required to get Morchi to actually be attackable. Then you have to spend 80 or so seconds to go from Morchi to the battlefield, or the other way around, to go from the battlefield to Morchi. This also might be even longer, depending on if you have to wait for the patrols across the bridges before you can make your way past them. Then another 80 or so seconds to travel all the way down to the last trash pack before the last boss. And then another solid minute before the roleplay to get to the last boss makes him attackable. All this combined totals out to be a 6 minutes of extra time, basically unskippable, unshortenable time you have to deal with when you are inside this dungeon. That is perhaps what might be even more annoying or frustrating for players, even more so than some of the mobs or bosses we have just seen nerfed today. It's just the overall loss of time when you can't really do anything about it. You just have to sit back and take it and take in all of the RP that's happening in the key. That is also perhaps what we might have gotten to be a little bit shortened, but I guess for now we have to make do. We have to be happy with the fact that at the very least, after only 2.5 months, Blizzard figured out this dungeon was a bit over the top, a bit out of the average compared to the others, and has received some nerfs. So we will take this for today, for this reset. We will take this set of changes for Muruzond's Rise, hoping that, of course, when we go and check our Mythic Plus recap a week from now, perhaps, we will see better results in this dungeon compared to what we've seen up to now in Muruzond's Rise. So, for today, we are leaving each other on this Wednesday. I'm going to leave you to the rest of the beginning of your new reset on this patch 10.2.5. We are starting our goodbyes by thanking, as usual, all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, which can, as usual, still be given for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I hate it when I have to go out twice for errands. I came out in the morning and then I realized some things had to be done in the afternoon and I had to go out again. Ah, my precious time.